Miaoyi with the white pieces opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to c5. Stefan goes for the, I don't know if it's Stefan or Stefan, not sure how they pronounce names in Reykjavik. I mean in Iceland, but yeah, let's go with Stefan. Knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. The Nimzovich-Rossolimo attack against the Sicilian. We have pawn to g6 and castles. We have bishop to g7, rook to e1, and now just pawn to e5. Now, this has all been seen before, nothing new here. We have bishop captures, d captures, and now pawn to a4. And okay, pawn to a4 is a fairly rare move, and by fairly rare, I mean there are some 30 games in the database, usually just d3 is played here. It's a very standard position, but after pawn to a4, there is a famous game that was played between Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen, and Fabiano did play it against Magnus, and he defeated Magnus Carlsen in the final of the CCT 2023, after a4, a queen to e7 is the move that Magnus played. Here we have pawn to a5. And, okay, bishop to e6, queen to a7, and pawn to a5 are the top 3 engine moves, so it is well known. And also, Miaoyi already played this position this year against Sofia Pogorelski in the Belgrade tournament where she won. So, obviously, Stefan very well prepared and goes into that game. So knight to e3, same move that Miaoyi played against Sofia. And now knight to h6 is what was played in that game. In the Belgrade that we mentioned, but here, knight to e7, it is the top move recommended by the engine. So our good friend, the untitled one, Stefan, is very well prepared again. And it is now, as of move 8, that we have a completely new game. And this is where our game begins. So let's check out how the game continues. Knight to c4. And the c4 is a beautiful square for the knight. There's no d pawn for Stefan, and well, you will have trouble playing b5. So the knight will remain there for a very long time, and also it comes with a threat of just capturing the pawn on e5. So you should defend that. Queen to c7, nicely defending the pawn. Pawn to d3, and now pawn to b6, and the bishop to e3. We have pawn to h6 here. Bishop to e6 was much better, but after pawn to h6, there is a beautiful move that Miaoyi can play in order to really seize the initiative in this position. So feel free to pause the video and really soak in the position. What would you play here if it was your move? And, you know, bear in mind the channel where you are watching this game. So for those of you there who were able to do it, and I imagine that's literally everyone watching this video, congratulations, it is pawn to b4. That is the move, and it looks like it should be impossible as the pawn can be captured by the a and by the c pawn. The problem is you can't really capture with the c pawn. Then you allow the capture on b6. You can only capture with the a pawn. And well, you don't have to capture it all. You could also play pawn to b5. In the game, a captures on b4 was played, but the real idea is that after pawn to b5, knight captures on a5, c captures on b4, and now knight back to b3. But after rook captures on a4, you will not capture, and on double black's pawn, you will just move the queen, and now black is stuck with a double b pawn. And white will have a better position. But in the game, a captures and b4 was played, and now comes the idea, pawn to a5. Now really going after that b6 pawn. And now again, you could advance it to b5, but here it kind of loses you the game. Just knight to b6 attacks the rook, and once the rook moves, bishop captures on c5. And I mean, this is just terrible. For example, castles, look at this bishop here, controlling everything. The queen is coming to d2, you're going to capture this pawn. It's you have passed a pawn already on a5, so this will be winning for white. So b captures on a5 is played, and now bishop captures on c5. We have bishop d6, and not castles, of course. Castling, you run into a lot of trouble. You could play bishop captures on b4 as the rook is undefended, but also bishop to d6 is very annoying, and then you capture on b4, so it's not the best. So instead, after bishop captures on c5, bishop to e6 was played, and now we have bishop to d6. Bishop to e6 a very tricky move to deal with, because here you kind of should go for the natural knight d6 check. You take away castling privileges from the black king, and then you just continue playing. The problem is after king to f8, it's not easy to sort of continue playing here, but you played d4, and it makes sense. You're threatening the captures on a5, kind of forcing black to capture, and once black captures, you will improve the position of the knight, and you bring the queen into the game, and you pile up on that. But here, bishop to d6 was played, but now queen to d8, and there doesn't seem to be a good follow-up for white. Yes, knight f captures on e5 is played, but now bishop captures on c4, and now Lu sacrifices the exchange. Knight captures on c4, and she gives up the rook on a1. Now, also a very interesting question. Would you capture the rook on a1? Is that something that, interests you, and giving up this diagonal to the white queen? Well, perhaps our good friend the engine says that you can do it, but perhaps bishop to c3 or just bishop to d4 is the way to go. But yeah, I mean, you already came this far. You might as well capture it and start advancing that past a pawn. So bishop captures on a1. Queen captures, now threatening the rook on h8, and castles kingside. Rook to e3. Now Miaoyi has the knight, the bishop, the queen, and the rook, and will try, of course, to play rook h3, rook captures on h6, and then queen or rook to h8, checkmate. So that's the plan, and of course, once black stops that, you will try to work around that. So rook to e8, and rook to h3, going after the h6 pawn, and now knight to d5. A very, very tricky move, inviting rook captures on h6. And what do you do if you capture the knight? Well, of course, if the knight is captured, then pawn captures pawn, attacks the knight, and then if the knight moves, you take the bishop. So it's not really a piece sacrifice. And on the other hand, if you don't react to it, then knight to c3 will close this diagonal pretty much forever. So here, e captures on d5, a c captures on d5, and now rook captures on h6. So you don't have time for captures, otherwise you're getting checkmated on h8. So pawn to f6, giving up the g6 pawn. This is getting incredibly difficult to calculate. Rook captures on g6, and king to f7. Now guarding the f6 pawn with the king and queen. Now comes rook to h6, and look at this position. There's only one good move for black, and of course it's to take material. D captures on c4, and this is the position that I saw on Twitter when I decided to analyze this game. Here Miaoyi played the incredible bishop to c7, which objectively loses you the game, and if you ask the engine, it will give it 2 question marks, but I decided for the thumbnail to give it 2 exclamation marks, as is just a really wonderful move. Now, like I said, sometimes you have to lose the game in order to win it, but here, objectively, it is a draw. I will just show it because bishop to e7 is the move that threatens queen captures on f6, and I have to capture with the queen. If capture with the rook again, queen captures on f6 will happen, and you lose the game. But here, after queen captures, you lose the queen. So, okay, rook to h7 with check, king to g8, rook captures on e7, rook captures, now you free up the back rank, so you don't get checkmated. And after something like c3, okay, it looks pretty scary, but the white queen can easily get into the game, start checking the black king, and it will be a draw. But after d captures on c4, she decides to go forward and plays bishop to c7 instead. The idea being that now if queen captures, then you are no longer guarding the pawn, so if captures, you can just give a check, and after king g8, rook to h8 will be checkmate. So, a very nice idea, but there is a strong counter to this move, and our good friend Stefan plays queen to d4. He offers a queen sacrifice in order to deliver checkmate on e1. So yeah, sometimes you don't want to be too active if your king is struggling. For error here, if you had h3, then such a move would not be possible. But Miaoyi just didn't have enough time in her game to make some room for the king, as she was busy attacking all the time. So queen to d1, of course you're not going to get checkmated, and now queen to d5. The idea is to stop queen to h5 check, but here king to g7 is much stronger, removing the threat of queen to h5 check altogether. By playing queen to d5, your king is still kind of an awkward square. So rook to h7 with check, king to g8, and now rook back to h4. Now just c captures on d3. It's perfectly fine. Black is winning here. C captures on d3, and now comes the first mistake. Rook 8 to c8. It seems like a very natural move, but yeah, you don't want to waste moves, not even for one move, because here it's a race. Believe it or not, it's a race, and b3 has to be played. The reason why b3 has to be played is now that if you try something like queen to g4, you can comfortably block with the queen, and if queen to c4 check, you can easily play king to g7, and now after h3, because you also have to stop checkmate, now the pawn is already on b2, so that's a huge that will have a huge impact on the game. b1 queen is coming, but instead, after the c captures on d3 move, Stefan played rook 8 to c8, attack the bishop on c7, but now queen to g4 check, queen to g5, and queen to c4 check. You don't really have king to g7, because if you go king, I mean, you still do, but it's no longer winning for black, because now h3, and the pawn would have been on b3, and you'd have b2, but here there's nothing. Rook d1 with check, and you probably get some sort of a repetition here, even queen to e5 with check, where now if you capture with the bishop, then just rook captures on c4, and black is winning due to greater material. So you will have to block this, not accept the queen, and then comes queen e6, black defends everything, and it will be a draw. But yeah, after queen to c4 check, he tried king to f8, but now comes pawn to g3. Pawn to h3 would still be a pretty cool way to blunder the game. If you play pawn to h3, then rook can just take the bishop, and if queen captures, you lose the rook on h4. But Miaoyi plays it correctly. After king f8, she plays g3, creating some breathing room for the king while defending the rook on h4. And now comes rook to e1 with check. The position is still objectively drawable, if that is a word, but you have to find a move that I don't think anyone finds here. Like, you can try. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the only move for Stefan that does not lose you the game here, while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a much better player than myself and a lot of other people. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is queen to f5. Definitely not the first move that comes to mind. But it does prevent a lot of stuff. For one, it prevents rook h7 with the threat of queen f7 checkmate. It stops queen g4 if you, for example, go for rook to h8 and then you want to bring the queen to g4. It's just very, very strong. And also, you can go queen to e6 or for a queen trade. So, to give you an example, it's a bishop d6 check, king g7, rook to g4 check, king to h8 will probably result in a repetition of moves here. So that's the strongest move. The problem is if you play something like a4, what is the threat here? Well, the threat is actually rook to h7. It's really important to stop this rook from coming to h7, because how are you stopping checkmate now? Not a lot of ways for you to do it. If you block with the rook, then rook h8 check, you can just pick up this rook. You can also give up the material here, but it doesn't help you. And if you try queen to g6 to control it this way, now just bishop to d6 check, king to, rook to e7 blocking only move, and now bishop captures with check, king e8, and queen captures on c8 will be checkmate. So that's the problem. But in the game, rook to e1 check was played, and now Miaoyi is completely winning. King to g2, we have rook to c1 going after the queen and seemingly winning material. But bishop to d6 with check, with king to g7, and now queen to e6, and there is no defense here. Queen e7 check, followed by queen to h7 checkmate, whatever else, because there's really no way to defend for black. f5 was played here, so the queen controls the e7 square, but not just bishop to e5 check, and he was in this position on move 36 that Stefan Bergsson resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. After king to f8, rook to h8 check will be played, and after queen to g8, as this is the only move, rook captures and g8 will be checkmate. So yeah, a very nice game.